How do you design overwhelmingly good layouts? Well, the number one thing about graphic design is your layout, how you lay out information in a graphic way, or how you lay out graphics on a piece of paper, on a poster, and an Instagram post. How do you do it very well? I've been a graphic designer for years now, and I have seen many layouts. I've created many layouts for different companies, for different pieces of work. Layouts has been the number one most important thing I've learned in good graphic design, and it really does set you apart when you know how to create a good layout. So today I'm going to be giving you at least 5 tips, on creating stunning layouts. This video is brought to you by Millernote. Before I get into it, I just want to say thanks for watching this video. Also, a lot of you aren't subscribed that watch. It's free, helps me out. It'll help you out with all the amazing information we've got on the channel. So go ahead, press that red subscribe button. Okay, so if you're new to graphic design, a layout is what is on the page. It's how you lay out information in different blocks. Graphic design is all about giving you the easiest way to view information, and it can be interesting, it can be arty, it can be whatever you want it to be, but good layout is sometimes difficult to do. Now in this video, I'm not going to be going over hierarchy or contrast or weight. I'm just going to be going ahead and talking about pure layout fundamentals. So the first tip I'm going to give you is using grids. This seems pretty obvious. Yeah, we know about the grids. It's just the grid paper that you use and you can create whatever you want. Grids are not just boxes on a screen that you use to line up your work. Grids can be pretty crazy. You can have perspective grids too. Grids allow you to place your work or assets or information in an orderly fashion on a piece of paper. Grids take a lot of the work out of layout for you. If you see this poster that I'm designing right now, I am literally using a 17 by 21 grid, and what this does is it allows me to very consistently put assets and information on this poster. You can see that I'm making sure that my typography is from left to right, so people are having an easy time reading it. Obviously, there's like hierarchy and weight balance going on here, but where my assets are going on in this poster, you can tell that it's been laid out pretty easily. Now, what if I wanted to create more of a landscape poster? Well, you can see here in this sped up video that the landscape poster is doing the same thing. I've got a 4-column grid that's allowing the information to flow left to right, up to down, and it's still visually interesting because the grids allow me to be more creative. And I'm a firm believer that where you have restrictions, like when you have grids or something, then it's going to make you more creative because it's a problem to solve. A good way to think of grids is not a restrictive thing, but as a guide, and that's the way that I use them. It's kind of like having a metronome when you're playing an instrument or a click track. You play in time, and all it does is that it lets your work be in time with the composition. Everything is there for you. Now, grids can get super weird and you can get really strange compositions. If you don't know what a composition is, it's all the assets together in one on the layout. But layout design is fundamentally the way that you place the objects. And if you know the fundamentals from contrast and hierarchy, which you should if you're learning design, then using a grid for layouts is pretty easy. The next tip is the rule of thirds. You've heard this all over the place, I'm sure, but does anyone really know what they're doing with it? Well, the rule of thirds is a very basic grid. It's just a 3x3 grid. You see it in your iPhone or your camera because that's the way that a lot of photographers compose their photographs. Well, in design, this grid can be used just like the last one, but it's a very simple one. It really means that you have a nice proportion on the screen. So for instance, in this poster that I'm designing, I've got a portrait image of a man. I go ahead and I put him on the grid and you can see me lining it up. I know I sort of want my text on the left because we read left to right, and I want an image on the right hand side. So I'm looking at this sort of poster as more like a magazine cover or a piece in a magazine. So my man is on the right and I've gridded him up so I've got enough space, although I could have found a better image to illustrate this better. I've gridded him up so he fits along the page, but he's also giving us enough room on the left. As you can see through those grid lines, I will not let him go through those grid lines. Now my lettering and all the typography goes into that blank space on the left. What we've done here is created a really nice proportional balance, and what grids do is allow you to place assets nicely, but the rule of thirds allows you to create nice proportions and composition on the page. Now don't be scared if you don't know how to create grids or you don't know what you're doing with grids. There's loads of books online like Raster Systems, which is a hugely beneficial book for you to read. But the way that I create grids inside of Illustrator is I use my rectangle tool. I draw around my area, so that's my artboard. I go to object, I go down to path, and then split into grid, and I make my grid from there. Then I go to Command 5 or go to View, Guides, Create Guides, and it will create some guides for me to use. All you need to do is start practicing with that. Create a poster, do something nice. I've got plenty of posters, even ones that I've done for Adobe, for certain anniversary events, for InDesign. I've created lots of different things for different clients with this same method. The third layout tip, because I realized that this video is talked a lot about grids, but it's a huge thing, is repeating elements. Design should be consistent no matter where you are, unless it's like an art style, let's say. Consistent design allows for a brand to be repeated. It allows for you to have a system. And what consistency does is it makes it easier on the brain to read. That's why we don't read from top to bottom all the time with letters going down. It's why we read left to right, even on a poster, and any signage that even looks cool or any poster, we have a system in place. But by repeating systems and elements in a design, for instance, a pattern across the board of a poster, or little ornates around a certain piece of illustration, or even a color scheme, so you repeat only a few selected colors, allows it to be a lot more professional and easier to read. If you're beginning in design, or maybe you've been a designer for a while, but you struggle with the restrictions that you've put on yourselves, so you just sort of put loads of colors down, loads of fonts down, loads of different ideas down, and then at the end your design work looks a bit messy and doesn't look very professional. Well, that is because you have not restricted enough. The best way to restrict yourself is by repeating certain elements. You can see in my Adobe poster that I repeated this certain pattern in a block modular grid, and this made it look pretty cool. I didn't do anything really fancy, I just repeated certain elements. You can see some plus signs, some mathematical signs, you know, the divide, the times, and the equals in this poster as well, all the way around. I just repeated those because when the brain has seen something, it's familiar to see it again, so you don't have to be spending a lot of time. There's not loads of detail. Which brings me on to the next one, which is technically the fourth one, I think, but it's called balance. Balance is huge. We create balance through symmetry, or giving the illusion that something has enough weight on one side as well as the other. A good poster will be balanced from left to right, and it will have a good amount of assets on there that work. So it needs to be readable, simplistic, or however you want the poster to be. But as long as it's legible and it's balanced overall in its composition, it's a good poster. And that's the one thing that I look for, and most designers look for in any design. Is it balanced? Because if it's not, it's unbalanced and it feels weird, looks weird, doesn't work. We can see in all my posters that the way that I get balance is through using assets that are repeating, but also in my hand lettering, I use, and many others use, symmetry. In all my compositions on Instagram where I do hand lettering, you could put a line straight down, vertically down, and it will look roughly the same as to the left and the right. This symmetry creates balance, and that's why you can do all these cool mandala things inside of Illustrator where they repeat all the way around. It's really fun, like these symmetry brushes. But balance is achieved by creating certain weights on either side that look similar. That's why we use the rule of thirds. A good composition has good balance within it. Talking about balancing things out, what about the white space? The next tip is using white space. White space is the area of a layout that you leave blank, and the problem that a lot of designers have at the start of their careers, or anyone who's just learning, is that they're afraid to leave certain things blank. Now the reason for this is probably because you don't have the eye for balance or the eye for design yet, which comes over experience. Not even joking, in just 2 years time you'll be shocked at what you will recognize now as good design, and that will keep happening every so often. You'll just start realizing your old work wasn't as good as your new work. But white space is super important in design. Too much content in a layout is overwhelming, so having enough space around it really opens it up and lets it breathe. Now, this is obviously different if your design direction is meant to be a bit confusing, which I wouldn't suggest doing, because the client who wants it to be overwhelming and confusing obviously doesn't understand people very well. But let your work breathe. Have white space. Don't be afraid. Use it tastefully. Don't go ultra minimalism all the time. Everyone gets sick of ultra minimalistic, simplistic logo design. But white space is good, and you can see within my posters here, especially with the Kingdom Come logo, there's a lot of white space around this. The reason being is if I scaled this logo up so it fit the 1920 by 1080 artboard, it would just look awful. It needs to be scaled down, and there needs to be a nice balance of white space at the top, bottom, left and right. The same is for posters. Make sure you have a nice, not a bleed, but this space on either side of the content from up, down, left and right. This will frame your work and make it easier for people to see. White space is all to do with, like, you know, hierarchy and those fundamentals as well, which we'll get into another video. Now, before I go into the last tip, which will change your life, I want to thank Milanote for sponsoring this video. You're most likely a designer or someone who wants to be a designer. And if you are wanting to be a designer, or even if you already are, then Milanote has got you covered. Milanote is an app that I use to control all my ideation with clients, by myself. It's like a whiteboard online that you can use to collaborate. All you simply have to do is drag in images to it, and you can create a mood board. You can create a project brief. I've got tons of boards in there for different projects. Each project gets its own board with like a creative brief in there, a place where I can write notes about the project. If I have something that is inspiring me, or if there's some sort of mood board that I'm doing for that project, I'll shove it in there so the client can review. It's a great place for me to upload my end artwork as well. So if the client needs the files, I'll just upload the files to Milanote on the page that they can see and edit, and they can download it. Milanote is more like working on the wall in a creative studio. It allows you just to place things in there very visually instead of doing it all text-based like in some other applications. I truly love Milanote, and I've been using them regardless of being sponsored by them for years now, and you will not be disappointed because you can sign up for completely free and use it today with the link down below in the description. So sign up for free, the link is down there, go check it out. Now, the last method that I promised to give you is really life-changing, and it is the box method, and this is one I started using within hand lettering. When I'm creating a composition for my hand lettering, it's very difficult to like work out where the words should be to make the composition nice. You can have any words composed very nicely and it'll be hand lettering. The box method is basically, instead of using words, we use shapes. We use boxes. So if you're doing a typographic poster and you wanted to work out the composition, the hierarchy, the weight, then all you do is use a box. And what this does is it allows you to quickly wireframe absolutely everything that you need, all the information in that poster. You can do this with photographs, you can do it for web pages, which a lot of people do. It is basically just wireframing for a web page, seeing where all the content blocks should be. Even in my Kingdom Come logo, where it's more of like a badge and it's more of like a hand-lettered illustration. I've even shown you here the frame, which is the circle, the oval around it, but I've also shown you that I've got a small block, big block, small block. And those small blocks are the things I don't want you to read at first. They're kind of like, they're not the most important part of the composition. Kingdom definitely is. And then that, you know, come at the end, thy kingdom come, you know, is least important. So it's easily readable. And it looks balanced because it's symmetrical. So if you're struggling with creating a composition, then just write down the words on a piece of paper, or just write them down in Illustrator, draw a box, like use a rectangle tool to draw a box around them, and then move those boxes inside of a gridded composition to see where they should fit. And if they fit nicely, you can change the sizing of the boxes depending on how big the type is going to be. Then you'll have yourself a very nice composition without having to even read anything. You can tell if a piece of work is going to be composed and laid out well just by the shape of the composition, those boxes, because that's all type is. They're all in boxes, and we want to make sure that each part of the layout is correct, each asset within there. So that's it. Those are my 5 tips on composition. Those are just a few, and you probably have tons more to say, but I don't want to make this video longer than it needs to be because you guys have got stuff to do and things to design. So if you do have any more tips, and please do share them down below in the comments section, and I will try to respond, or I will look at it, and everyone else can have a little gander down there too to get more tips. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please press that red subscribe button. If you did enjoy the video and you reckon it will help someone you know, then go ahead and share the video with them. It really does help. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Goodbye. Peace.